Hello friends, with the grand initiative of the Zoological Society of Assam, I am here to present a topic, fossils, which is very relevant from the viewpoint of all the undergraduate zoology students as well as maybe for those opting for competitive examinations. I dedicate this piece of presentation to all my teachers who taught me in the prestigious Cotton College and the iconic Guwahati University. At the end of this presentation, I will want all my viewers to be confident on the following points: the definition and the associated terminologies, the origin of the word fossil, the former ideas on fossils, and what is the necessity for the study of fossils, the conditions of fossilization, the process of fossilization, fossils as indicators of past climate, the kinds of fossil, and the significance of the study of fossils. At the very beginning, viewers, let us ask ourselves one question as to what a fossil is. If we go for an elaborate definition, we can say a fossil is any preserved remains, impression or trace of any once living thing from a past geological age. Examples include bones, shells, exoskeletons, stone imprints of animals or microbes, objects preserved in amber, hair, petrified wood, oil, coal and DNA remnants. But then if you have to answer a one-mark question, you definitely need a smaller definition like this. Fossils are remains or impression of a prehistoric plant or animal embedded in rock and preserved in petrified form. Now, this is what a fossil looks like, and petrified here means that the organic matter of the animal changes into a stony substance, which is also known as ossification. Let us very quickly go to the origin of the word fossil. Now see here, how does a fossil look like in a rock? It is a mid-16th century word which comes from the Latin word fossus, meaning having been dug up. Now fossils are often found in rock formations deep in the earth, like you see in this picture. Rock formations here mainly means the sedimentary rock formations, because it is only in the sedimentary rock formations that we find these animals that once lived on the earth being trapped and becoming fossils. And this becoming fossils is known as fossilization. That is, it is the process of remains becoming fossils. Way back in 1823, William Buckland of Oxford wrote learnedly about fossils under the title On Observations on Organic Remains Attesting the Action of a Universal Deluge. Later, Lyell states that it took 150 years of dispute and argument to persuade scholars that fossils were really remains of what were once living organisms, and 150 years more to convince them that they were not the results of Noah's flood. I think you all know what is a Noah's Ark. You have heard about the story of the Noah's Ark. But then, why did they have to argue this much? Because former ideas as to what a fossil is was totally different. This was totally misunderstood in the past. To Aristotle and the ancient philosophers, they were artificial results of spontaneous combustion or abortive attempts of inorganic matter to take on the form of life. Ridiculous. Empedocles, who found the fossil of hippopotamus bones in Sicily, thought that he discovered a battleground where gods and titans fought. And then Henrion in 1718 regarded fossils as molds and casts left over in the creation of animals and plants. It means that after the animals found life in them, they left the molds and casts. So that was a reason why the late scientists later on had to argue that much what a fossil is. In this slide, friends, I just want to compare fossils with evolution. We can say that fossils are just a speck of cloud in an entire sky of evolution. An interesting picture I just wanted to show you is the comparison of two skulls here to bring out the evolutionary history of the hobbits. The larger skull is that of a present human being, and it has been compared to a smaller skull to trace out the evolution. Nothing to do with your academics, but let us learn a new word known as hieroglyphics. Fossils are nature's hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics are, just like alphabets or the fragments of a picture that is thrown and then comes together or is brought together by the scientists to bring out the biological history of that animal. Here I want to project another very significant definition given by Charles Lyell, and the eminent geologist who was a man who could even influence young Charles Darwin at the beginning of his career. He defined fossil as any body or traces of body, animal or vegetable, buried and preserved by natural causes. Now if you have to give this definition, kindly do that within inverted commas. Every fossil is either ancestral to some living thing or is representative of an extinct line. Another word that I want to speak about is paleontology, which is the science of fossils or the entire or the ancient history of animals and plants. Now a question crops up. Why do we need to study fossils? Some animals and plants are only known to us as fossils. We have never seen them. But by studying the fossil record, we can tell how long life has existed on Earth and how different plants and animals are related to each other. Often we can work out how and where they lived and use this information to find out about their ancient environments. If we begin at the present and examine older and older layers of rock, we will come to a level where no fossils of human beings are found. If we continue backwards in time, we will successively come to levels where no fossils of flowering plants are present, no birds, no mammals, no reptiles, no four-footed vertebrates, no land plants, no fishes, no shells, and no animals at all. That means we trace back, we trace back. These concepts are summarized in the general principle called the law of fossil succession. Succession here means what animal comes after which animal. It is a linear tracing path. The kinds of animals and plants found as fossils change through time. And when we find the same kinds of fossils in rocks from different places, we know that the rocks are of the same age. I mean to say, we may be able to find different rocks in different places of the earth having the same type of animals. So when the same type of animals are present in these rocks, we can say these rocks are related and these rocks come from the same age. Now friends, before going to the aspect of fossilization, I have to mention about the iconic Archaeopteryx. Now this is a diagram I often draw for my students when I'm in my class. Of course I miss the students now in this lockdown period. Archaeopteryx, for your information, is an iconic fossil, and it is often thought as the missing link between dinosaurs and birds. It really plays an important role not only in the study of the origin of birds but then in the study of dinosaurs as well. Uh, Archaeopteryx seemed to confirm Darwin's theories and has become a key piece of evidence for the origin of birds. Actually, it is a transitional stage between birds and reptiles. It was first described by the German paleontologist H.V. Mayer in 1861. Since then, Archaeopteryx has been the main focus of controversy surrounding the origin of birds and their links with dinosaurs. All animals cannot become fossils. There are a set of conditions necessary for an animal to become a fossil. The most common conditions include the possession of hard parts, a skeleton or shell, and the rapid burial. So if the animal is too soft, it is difficult for that animal to become a fossil, and if it is not buried rapidly after death, then there is least chance of it being a fossil. Besides being tough and hard, the organism must come to rest in a place where it stands a good chance of being buried before it decays or disintegrates. So maybe amber, maybe near the volcano, those are the ideal places where an organism may be becoming a fossil easily. As for the skeletons that contain a higher percentage of mineral matter are most readily preserved because here permineralization or petrification is most easiest. Other conditions that leads to fossils include an environment that was biologically inert. So there has to be least activity. Areas that are receiving a large steady supply of sediment, such as the deltas of the major rivers and parts of the earth below the sea level compared to those above the sea level. Because below the sea level you find a lot of inert environment as well as you find a lot of sediments for an animal or organism to become a fossil. The ideal place to become a fossil is at the bottom of a quiet sea or lake where the prospective fossil is safe from damage. So that is one condition, safe from damage, and where it is covered rapidly with sediment. For this purpose, clay is an excellent option. The sediment protects the tissues and helps to exclude predators and solvent water. Next we come to the process of fossilization, which is depicted in a step-by-step process like this. Step 1. Death must occur if the process of fossilization is to begin. Death here is preferably some sort of catastrophic death. Step 2. The soft tissue decomposes if not eaten by scavengers, leaving only the bones behind. In only rare instances that the entire body is covered upon death. Otherwise, partially the body is being eaten by the scavengers or is being weathered. Step 3. The scavengers will tear the body apart and transport the majority of the bones elsewhere. So it gets fragmented or it is thrown here and there. Now the wind, rain and other weather conditions also are responsible for scattering the bones. Step 4. The bones that are left behind will weather by the sun, rain, wind, etc. and then the bones are distorted or broken before becoming buried by the blowing sand and soil. Now step 5. The protein material in the bone is replaced with minerals and they are dissolved in the soil's groundwater. This creates a rock-like substance called a fossil, and this actually is the permineralization part. Step 6. Water and wind action wears away the layers of the soil that has been built up by the fossil, and this makes the discovery possible because the upper layers which has been covering the fossil is taken away due to weathering or other factors, and the fossil gets gets out from the soil or the rock, making discovery possible. So friends, continuing from the previous slide on the process of fossilization, I want to give you a pictorial description about the process of fossilization, which comprises of 4 stages. Number 1, death and decay. Here death and decay is generally a catastrophic death. Then we come to number 2 is the deposition. The hard remains are rapidly covered with sand and silt, and over time more layers continue to build up. The third process is a very important process in fossilization. It is known as permineralization. Here the pressure from the covering layers or the above layers of the rock causes the hard organic material to be replaced by minerals molecule by molecule. Now after the soft parts gets washed away, the minerals replace the tissues in the fossil or in the animal, and water seeps into these remains. The minerals dissolved in the water will seep into the spaces within the remains and they form crystals. These crystallized minerals cause the remains to harden along with the encasing sedimentary rock. Now permineralization can be processed or can be accomplished by 3 substages, whether it is silicification, pyritization or carbonate mineralization. So this is the most important stage of fossilization. Next we come to the erosion. Number 4 is erosion or exposure, where the fossil is in a position or the conditions are such that the fossil can be exposed to the environment because of the weathering factors or any other factors, and then the scientists are able to unearth the fossil and study them. So these are the 4 points, very concise, and when you see the picture it is very easy for you to remember, and if it is in a 2-mark or 3-mark question, this is the most appropriate way to answer. Thank you. Now in this slide, let us come to the different kinds of fossils. We can broadly classify fossils into 2 types. Way back in 1920, Professor R.M. Field, he gave us 2 broad categories of fossils. Number 1, those furnishing direct evidence, which we say as body fossils, and those furnishing indirect evidence, which we say as trace fossils. Now those furnishing direct evidence, number 1, the actual remains such as insects in amber and mammoths in ice. Now amber here means the resin that comes out from the trees in a liquid form, and by chance if insects or bugs come in contact with this amber, they get entrapped and remain there for years and years to be discovered later. And mammoths are those Pleistocene epoch big mammals, which is the now we have the modern elephants. They were the ancestors of the modern elephants. Number 2, minute replacements molecule by molecule of the original organic matter by mineral salts, resulting in petrification. Now this word petrification I have already explained. Number 3, coarse replacements, second-hand copies of originals by means of molds and casts. Then number 4, the prints and impressions of leaves, jellyfish, etc. Then the second category or the trace fossils will include number 1, the coprolites, that is the solidified excreta or casts of the same. That means we do not see the animals, but then the excreta is the indirect evidence. Number 2, the artifacts such as ant hills or prehistoric fashioned flints. Now ant hills are the evidences of the ants living. We do not see the ants. Number 3, the tracks, trails and burrows. All these are the autographs of living animals. The animals are not directly seen. Number 4, the geologic formation. originating from organic sources such as graphite, limestone, flint, coal and petroleum. Okay friends, let us talk about fossils as climatic or environmental indicators. Now, the fossils that provide indirect or proxy information on the past environmental conditions are called paleoindicators. This is another new word, paleoindicators. Certain types of plants, for example, require specific temperature and moisture conditions in order to thrive. Then there are some kinds of aquatic organisms which are sensitive to water chemistry and can tolerate only narrow ranges of pH and salinity. Then we have these ice age mammals that became extinct at the close of the last glaciation and had specific environmental requirements that were quite different than those of today. The presence of fossils representative of these organisms can tell us a great deal about the environments of the past, what the climate was like and what sort of plants and animals inhabited the landscape. So if we combine the trace fossils and the body fossils, we can totally reconstruct the structure of the animal and its relationship to the environment and find out about its habitat and in which type of climate it resided, and then indirectly we can know about the environment. So friends, we have almost come to the end of this chapter, fossils, which was basically an overview chapter, and at the end we will have to discuss about the significance in the study of fossils or the importance of fossils. Yes, fossils are important evidences for evolution. It shows that life on Earth was once totally different from life that is found on Earth today. Fossils can give us an insight into how prehistoric plants and animals obtained food, how they reproduced, or even how they behaved. They provide the evidence for how or why the organism died. Fossils definitely allows the researchers to match the layers of rocks in different locations by the age, based on how similar the fossils in each rock layer are. This helps in understanding when the layers of rocks were formed, even when large distances separate them. That means the same type of rock may exist in different parts of the world. We can then say that this rock and that rock belong to the same age. Perhaps we can say this because the fossils in these rocks will be similar. Fossil type in a particular location will tell us what kind of an environment existed when the fossil was formed. Paleontologists can then determine the age of fossils by different methods. We will deal with the methods later on in the series of lectures to be followed. Thus, scientists can reconstruct body types of animals that no longer exist and put together to describe the evolutionary relationships between organisms. What we say are the hieroglyphics. Okay? So friends, we are at the end of the chapter fossils, and I want all my viewers to create a mind map. I think everybody knows, mind maps are, maps that we visually organize in our minds. It is just a graphical way or to structure information in your mind for better retention, because at the end of the day, I have to say that you will never carry your books to the examination. You should have all the chapters in your mind, and a mind map will help you to let out the analytical factors of the chapter easier. So regarding this chapter fossils, remember 5 points, or you retain in your mind these 5 boxes. Number 1, fossils, definitions and former ideas. Second, relationship of fossils with evolution. Third, why do we study fossils? Fourth, conditions and the process of fossilization. And fifth, fossils as environmental indicators. If you do this, definitely you need not study the significance. It comes out from all these 5 text boxes. So before ending, I just want to give you a set of my visualization for my next series. I have a plan for doing a series of lectures beginning from dating of fossils, incompleteness of fossil records. Then we go to zoo geography, which will include the tectonics and the distribution of animals, suppose. Lamarckism, Darwinism, Neo-Darwinism, evolution of specific animals like horse, then the products of evolution, adaptation, adaptive radiation, extinction, example of KT extinction, phylogenetic trees, macroevolutionary principles like Darwin's finches, and all these related to evolution, which is there in the CBCS undergraduate syllabus. As well, it will help in the study of the syllabus for the competitive examinations. Friends, please go through these sample questions, and at the end of the chapter, if you can answer all these sample questions, you will be confident about learning this chapter, and I will be happy that you have learned this chapter well. Thank you. Yes, I know you have the suggested readings in your syllabus from every university. The suggested readings for each paper has been incorporated at the last or at the end of the syllabus. But then above that, these are some of the books that I found which may help you to gather more knowledge and increase your confidence. And most of these reference books have Kindle versions available, so you may read these books in the Kindle versions also. During this lockdown period, it will help you a lot. A very warm thanks, viewers, for your patient hearing, and you can catch me on these 2 mails for any feedback. A hearty acknowledgement and a very big thanks to the Zoological Society of Assam. Stay tuned.